Okay, let's have a look now at how Mikhail Tal fell victim to the King's Gambit at the hands of David Bronstein, who is arguably an uncrowned king. He was very close to beating Botvinnik in an official World Championship match. Mikhail Tal did manage to beat Botvinnik and was World Champion for 1 year. But here he's on the receiving end of dynamism and creativity from fellow David Bronstein, fellow Grandmaster, Russian Grandmaster. Okay, so E takes D5, E4, the Falk Bear counter gambit, so that early move D5 from black, breaking up the centre. Now D3, immediately challenging that pawn on E4, just knight F6 now, and it looks as though this is potentially very, very dangerous for White's king and the F2 square this line. D takes E4, knight takes E4. Well, first of all, there's that classic, threat Queen H4 here. The idea of knight takes G3 potentially. So White guards against that, but allows Bishop C5 here, which looks nasty. But thankfully, there's the pin now, Queen E2 at White's disposal. And now after Bishop F5, David Bronstein simply plays knight C3. After Queen E7, he seems to emerge from this position with an advantage out of the opening. He plays Bishop E3. So somehow it seems the black pressure is soaked up here, and David Bronstein is not too concerned about having doubled pawns potentially, but that's not the real thing here. There's a tactical line where the queens are going to be exchanged now. Knight takes C3 was played. So forget the double pawn comment. There's Bishop takes C5 here, attacking Black's queen, and offering the exchange of queens in effect. So Knight takes E2, Bishop takes E7, but White is theoretically better here in this position after Knight takes F4, Bishop A3. It's been a success out of this Falk Bear counter gambit. So Knight D7 was played, and now White has the luxury of castling queenside with advantage. Mikhail Tal played Bishop E4, and it seems, for the dynamism, for piece quality, remember that relationship that Kasparov talked about. You have material in a triangle, material, time and quality. So here David Bronstein is aiming for greater quality and time. He's playing knight G5, sacking D5, and now also sacking the exchange with G3, because it's leaving the black king exposed. And even if he castles queenside, there's going to be things like Bishop H3 potentially. So it's very dynamic play here from White. Bishop takes H1, G takes F4. What's a pawn, what's the exchange? Remember that relationship, material, quality, time, all interrelated. You can sometimes sacrifice material to gain advantages in quality and time. So here Tal played C5, and now we have the move Bishop C4. Maybe C5 is an accuracy, maybe castling queenside, inviting knight F7 was actually better. But anyway, this is the continuation with Black's king in trouble now. After Bishop C6, knight takes F7. There's an uncomfortable look to Black's position, unable to castle. Well, he could castle actually kingside technically. That's a legal move here. But in this position, maybe Rook takes D7, Bishop takes knight E5 looks good to me. So what Tal did was actually B5, and now we have knight D6 check, King E7, and knight takes B5. I think technically best was just to take on B5 now and play Rook D8. This knight caused a lot of damage now. It shouldn't have been allowed to do this. After Rook HF8, Bronstein increased his advantage now by getting this knight back to D4 using that pin and attacking the bishop. So bishop moves, now knight E6, protecting F4, attacking the rook. It's really nasty, this pressure, the exchange down, because these bishops are very powerful. Now Rook G1, and also there's a lot of targets on the king side. Bishop E4. White can probably just take on G7, it looks good. But he played actually knight C7, attacking the rook moves. It's a really complicated, hairy position actually. So let's just see what happened. Rook takes G7 check. Now check again. The king's getting kicked around. Now rook e7. So combining attacks on the king with attacking this bishop. The bishop moves. There's bishop d3 at the very least, skewering the rook to the king on that diagonal. So he was keen to leave the bishop on e4 with knight f6, but now knight e6, introducing more threats against the king, like rook g7. Also maybe knight g5 could be handy, attacking the rook as well. The rook has to move as well, so rook c8. Now b3, lovely little move with the bishop coming back to this beautiful diagonal. So this is what I call unpleasant to play, the exchange up. Although there's also 5 white pawns and 3 black pawns, so it's 2 rooks, knight, bishop versus a rook, 2 bishops and knight, but there's 2 extra pawns as well. So this is ample compensation for white. White's doing very, very well, and there's still all these horrible threats. Like after knight g5, there's bishop f7 has been introduced. So Mikhail Tal parries at least bishop f7 with bishop d5, but then there's check here, and it's total harassment type position, and it gets worse now because of this bishop on the long diagonal, bishop b2. This is just resignable, I think, for black. After c4, bishop f5 was played, just hitting that rook on c8. I don't think rook c6 looks particularly palatable in this position, and let's just quickly check. Actually, let's do an engine check on this position. There must be a knockout blow, surely. In fact, bishop f6 and rook h7, looking at it now, looks like mate in 2. Yes, bishop f6, and it's actually a forced mate in 2, it seems. Whatever black does next, so rook f6, rook h7, but there doesn't seem to be too many alternatives which avoid mate the next move, like bishop g7 mate is threatened. So this is clearly a lost position now then. After bishop f5, actually Tal decided to play c3, just giving up the exchange, but this is just totally hopeless now. It's now 3 pawns down for Mikhail Tal, but 2 after taking on h2. Again, 3 pawns down after white takes on a7. Rook f2, and now rook a4, just defending that f4 pawn. And now it's easy for white. He just has to maybe queen his a pawn, and that's what he plays now. He's past the a pawn, he starts pushing it. There's enough things stopping h3 here, the bishop on c8 and the knight on g5. So bishop g2, trying to herd the pawn anyway, in principle. Knight h5, it's really too slow. Bishop b7 with threat of just bishop takes and a7. Knight takes f4. Now a nice little tactic from David Bronstein, just rook takes f4. Okay, so if rook takes f4, bishop g2, I guess, and if h3, just knight takes h3, that'd be protecting the rook. Or even just rook takes f2, because of h2 bishop takes g2. So it's totally lost here. Black resigned. So let's have a look at how Mikhail Tal was destroyed in that Falkbeer counter gambit. Again, so white not too worried about f2. He's aiming to castle queenside here, and it seems this queen exchange favours white after casting queenside. And this very interesting Bronstein-like. He's very famous for dynamic positional sacrifices, tapping into that relationship between material, time and quality. So not afraid to play dynamically. Tal was not the only one. So knight takes f7, b5, and now we see the king getting really kicked around, especially with this knight allowed to reroute via that d4 square. So black's king just being harassed all the time. And this horrible b3 move also unleashes the power of the dart squared bishop. And just white's just hugely up on material and starts pushing his a pawn decisively. And then there's this final tactic. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.